How are you?
Great.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that I have to join remotely, but yeah, I'm talking to everyone here from Singapore, which is actually pretty warm at the moment, as you can
Oh, we're
see.
jealous.
And I've got this Vue Toronto hat that I got from last time I was in Toronto, which I remember was pretty cold as well. But super happy to be able to talk to everyone here again. I wish I could be there, but unfortunately, since I moved to Singapore, it's an over 20 hours flight, so it's pretty difficult to arrange the schedule with that. But yeah, but I'm still happy to be able to present remotely and hopefully start off the conference with some good information.
Perfect. We're excited for it. Well, thank you so much. Can't wait to hear.
Excellent.
Okay. This talk is going to be about some Vue and Vite updates, and I want to spend the first half just taking a brief look back on the Vue 2 to 3 transition, because I think at this stage we are finally at a place where we can Vue 3 is now the default. Most new applications started are using Vue 3. The ecosystem is catching up. So I think it's a good time to sort of sit back and take a look back on what we did during this transition, some of the good decisions, some of the not so good decisions. And I think it's also fair to say that we did make some mistakes during this process. And I want to just be totally open and transparent and think about what we could have done better in this whole experience. And as far as I know, there are many users still stuck on Vue 2 due to the migration cost, blocked by dependencies, or legacy browser support. So I think the first mistake that we made was that there were too many small breaking changes. So the core of the issue here is that every single change that looked manageable in isolation, but the complexity really compounds exponentially when the many changes are combined. So each of the changes went through its own RFC discussions, but when we talked about those changes, we are always thinking about, so this single change looks manageable, right? It wouldn't be too hard, but when all of them put together, suddenly it becomes a much more difficult task for people to sort through everything all at once. So for each of these mistakes, obviously, we had some lessons learned. And the first lesson we learned from the first mistake is that we shouldn't break everything all at once. This kind of a big bang breaking changes release is almost always a bad idea. So, but that's in hindsight, right? We did it, and we caused more breakage than we intended, and it has caused the overall ecosystem to be split in half in some way, and it took about a very long time to get over that. In fact, we still have some users stuck on Vue 2 at this very moment. So the biggest important lesson that we learned is that we want to keep things working by default. So, and we want to start using this deprecate opt-in remove cycle in the future if we ever want to ship breaking changes again. And that means for everything that we want to change or break or remove, we always first keep everything working and then deprecate it. And then there will be an opt-in. There will be an opt-in phase where the new behavior is introduced under a flag, and the user can explicitly opt in to the new behavior without breaking anything. And then eventually the deprecated behavior is removed in the future release. And we will intentionally always stretch this period long enough so that all the users have enough time to learn about the changes, to deal with the changes. We also stagger and spread out these changes between releases. So there will never be this kind of a big bunch of breaking changes all together kind of situation. You always have enough time to deal with, but it comes slowly one at a time. A bit similar to how Angular spreads out small breaking changes between these major versions over a relatively long time. So, and another good example of a framework that's done this very well is Ember. So Vue has got to the stage where we believe this is going to be extremely important for the long run. So we can assure you that in the short term, we definitely are not thinking about any breaking changes. And for the long run, we want Vue 3 to be the stable foundation, and we will take this kind of changes very seriously. So mistake number 2 is underestimating the impact on ecosystem libraries, right? So when we think about the breaking changes, they were mostly discussed in the context of application level code. That is to say, we think about these breaking changes on whether they would affect the application code you write, but we didn't think in the context of how library authors, the amount of work library authors would have to work to adapt their existing libraries to Vue 3. So the result is we also changed a lot of internal APIs or internal behavior that made it very difficult for big libraries that relied a lot on these internal behaviors to upgrade to Vue 3. So as a direct result, this took some major ecosystem libraries a very long time to fully upgrade. For example, Nuxt and Vuetify were 2 major examples. And in fact, these are also 2 of the most prominent examples of Vue 2 applications being stuck on old versions because of the difficulty to upgrade from those dependencies. So the lesson learned here is that obviously ecosystem dependencies are critical when we talk about migrations. That's why Vue Core has adopted ecosystem CI. It is an automated CI system that allows us to run all the changes in Vue Core against downstream ecosystem dependencies, against downstream projects that depend on Vue. So in fact, as of now, we have over 15 projects integrated in the system, and we will be adding more in the future. So in the every Vue 3 release at the moment is, in fact, every commit can be run against all these downstream libraries before we make releases. And we will know whether things break before we even do the release. And we can reach out to these ecosystem library authors to work with them to resolve these issues before the release actually hits the registry. So another aspect of this is we want to discourage and prohibit use of internal APIs because we notice that this has been a major contributing factor of the difficulty for libraries to upgrade. So we are intentionally, so luckily with the availability of TypeScript in most of these projects nowadays, we're able to enforce that both at the type level, at the runtime level, right? So at the runtime level, sometimes we still need to expose some internal APIs for official tools or libraries to hook into. But for ecosystem libraries that we don't have direct control over, we will essentially move those private APIs from the type definitions so that it will be an error if these libraries ever attempt to use them. The third mistake is not releasing everything together, right? Vue 3 Core was released in September 2020 with many ecosystem parts that were still work in progress, right? And if you look back, that's almost 3 years ago. So there were documentation issues. Composition API wasn't introduced as a first-class concept in the documentation in the beginning. Official libraries, migration build, DevTool support, all of these were kind of lacking when Vue Core stable was released. So it caused confusion, right? The reason we did that was because we felt it was important to get something out of the door so the ecosystem can have the incentive to start to catch up, to start trying things out. But the result is releasing it without a completed ecosystem brought confusion to a lot of early adopters. Right? So these impressions can also spread and hurt adoption and upgrade incentives. So the lesson learned here is that first impression of these major upgrades really matters. You'd rather want to release late than incomplete. You want to have things polished and make sure on the big release, everything has to be ready. And more importantly, before big releases, you want to find ways to gather feedback and work with library maintainers to upgrade the projects before releasing. So this is work outside of just working on the code. This is more like being more proactive in the collaboration of the stakeholders and ecosystem. And this is something we definitely want to improve on if we want to do big changes in the future. So that's enough about the things that went wrong, but we believe there are also a lot of decisions that we did correctly and things that we believe that makes Vue moving in the right track. So the first thing that we did right, we believe, is embracing TypeScript. So nowadays, type checking is table stakes for front-end solutions. If you look at any major TypeScript, major front-end solutions right now, TypeScript integration, TypeScript support is going to be the first thing people look at. And it has proven to vastly improve the maintainability, especially in large, in team environments, for long-term projects. Type checking system is extremely important, and moving to TypeScript in the code base itself has also vastly improved the maintainability of Vue itself. This makes it a very solid foundation. The current code base, Vue code base, is a solid foundation for future iterations. What went right, number 2, was embracing composition. So we still remember the early days when composition API was introduced. It was inspired by React hooks, obviously, but it's rooted in Vue's own reactivity system. But in the early days, there were a lot of controversy. People didn't really get why we are doing it. And in fact, even today, we still see some users prefer Options API over Composition API, which is fair because the two APIs do address some different concerns. They have different priorities in the design, but there are limitations we found in the Options API that can only really be addressed with the introduction of a new API. So component logic reuse and refactor capabilities are key to scale. And an important thing to note here is that over the years, Vue's user base has slowly changed and shifted, right? In the early days, most Vue users were focused on, were small to medium use cases, where the focus is easy integration into existing backend systems, low-hanging fruit for adding interactions, low cost of adoption, low barrier of adoption. So these were the main reason that Vue got its early user base. But over time, we are also seeing more and more users using Vue to build more complex, more demanding use cases. So we're seeing a lot of large-scale single-page applications being built with Vue as well. And in fact, the whole industry has slowly starting to see more and more such use cases as a whole. So for Vue to first adapt to its changing user base, and also to adapt to the changing demands of the industry, we have to come up with something that addresses those new problems that arises with these new demands, and that is scalability. So Composition API was invented essentially to try to provide a way to unlock this kind of scalability while retaining as much user friendliness that's rooted in Vue as much as possible. So luckily, we found that with the polishing over time and the introduction of script setup, a lot of users have come to adopt Composition API, and they found that it actually has real benefits. And this also has led to really strong community efforts like Vue Use, which provides us with a collection of extremely useful utilities that addresses a lot of problems that isn't really suitable to be included in Vue Core, but is nicely addressed by the community. So in fact, I believe Vue Use is probably one of the biggest benefits that's directly resulted from Composition API. Now, what went right in number 3 is that we kept investing in developer experience, right? So Vite was, in fact, a direct result of our effort in VX. It's born out of a Vue-only dev server prototype, and it now has grown into its own whole ecosystem, right? Not only Vue and Nuxt is using Vite, but also a lot of other frameworks, other tools, which we'll touch on a bit later. And we also invested a lot of effort in rewriting Vue 3 stocks, the major rewrites that unifies the API styles. So every chapter you can toggle between Composition API and Options API, so you can see the connection between the two styles and unifies the learning experience of both API styles in the same structure. It also included the modernization of a lot of existing concepts, trying to keep up with the new best practices. We also invested heavily in the IDE front, IDE and TypeScript type checking front. So Volar is the kind of an umbrella project for a set of sub-projects that includes Vue's language server, VS Code extension, Vue.TSC, which is the CLI that wraps TypeScript and provides command line type checking for Vue components. So this whole set of tools, initially only for Vue, again, similar to Vite, got expanded into an ecosystem of a collection of tools that helps frameworks build improved IDE and TypeScript support. So Volar is now also spinning into its own framework agnostic core that not only supports Vue, but is also powering Astro and MDX and more and other potential frameworks that will adopt this, right? So again, our investment in DX not only benefits Vue users, but we're also seeing it actually expand out of the Vue ecosystem and benefiting more web developers as a whole. And I think another primary example, I think that kind of radiates into the Vue community is the Next team also has this project called Vue.js that houses a collection of really important projects that powers Next, but now are also start to be adopted outside the Vue ecosystem. For example, Nitro, which is the server engine that powers Next, we're seeing other meta frameworks built on top of Nitro. So these are really interesting efforts, and I think it's something that's unique in the Vue ecosystem. We're seeing a lot of good ideas that starts in the Vue ecosystem and then starts to having bigger impact than just the Vue ecosystem. What went right number 4 is as an overall result, Vue 3 is indeed better and growing, right? So obviously it took much longer than we'd hoped, but today Vue 3 has largely fulfilled the goals that we set out with. It has better performance, better TypeScript support, better scalability, overall a better development experience. And we're seeing the adoption of Vue 3 ticking up. I think this 48.8% of all Vue downloads are now on Vue 3. I think this number was actually taken a while ago, so we probably haven't reached 50% by now. So it's a half-half, and Vue 3 adoption has almost doubled growth in the past year. Ecosystem has caught up and thriving. So here is a link that actually lists a bunch of Here's the link that actually lists a bunch of Vue 3 component libraries. There are abundant choices, and these are all really good solutions. Okay. So looking forward, what's going to happen next in Vue Core? Stability is still definitely key, right? We're not planning on any 2 to 3 style breakage in the foreseeable future. Our focus is on improvements that are seamlessly adoptable without users having to do major migrations. We're working on some reactivity system and parser optimizations. In fact, the upcoming 3.4 will include a major reactivity system refactor that brings about improved performance without users having to do anything. We're also working on Vapor mode, which is completely opt-in, but will provide major rendering performance using a solid-like compilation strategy that compiles the same template into something more efficient. So what happened to Vue Core since 3.3? If you've kept notice on the development of Vue Core over the past several months, you've probably noticed there was a period of inactivity. And because we did another detour on Vite, similar to during the Vue 3 work, I spent a bunch of time working on Vite, and which eventually spawned into its own project. So earlier this year, I started thinking about the future of Vite, and we started thinking about how we can. We were seeing the trend of Vite becoming a shared foundation, so we believed there's a lot of need to make Vite even better, make it an even better foundation for future generations of frameworks built upon. So I was spending time trying to put together a team and finding the right people to work on Rolldown. which I will get into in a bit. But the result is that the work on Vue core kind of slowed down a bit. So right now, I'm trying to focus on delegation and collaboration in the Vue core. I'm trying to write down more concrete collaboration workflows so that the core team can triage and process issues faster without me being the bottleneck. And a while ago, we started getting things moving again in Vue core. And currently, we released 3.3.8. And we actually, in these latest two releases, we addressed 90% of the outstanding P4 issues. And there are a lot more fixes currently in the pipeline that's landing soon. So you can keep track of things on GitHub. And we have a project that manages the current a project on GitHub that shows the pipeline that how we're dealing with these issues. And 3.4 alpha is actually currently already released in alpha 1. So it currently includes the major improvements to the reactivity system by Johnson, who's the author of OLAR. So Johnson spent a lot of effort in this big pull request that is a major overhaul of the reactivity system, but only in terms of implementation. Right? The API and behavior remains the same, but now comes with more accurate and efficient recompute of computed properties. So as an example, previously, whenever a computed property dependency changes, the computed property will always need to recompute. But now the granularity is improved in the sense that if the dependency's value did not change, then the computed property won't even need to recompute. So there's also improved scheduling and array mutation performance in the PR, improved memory management. And during this whole process, we were running these changes against ecosystem CI to verify that it doesn't actually break anything in existing downstream projects. So, and when we merged the PR, the ecosystem CI was passive. So, but it's still a big refactor. So we want to make sure we give it enough real world testing, which is why we are releasing it in the alpha right now. So the alpha is out with these changes in there. So if you're interested, please help us test stability and report potential issues. There are more features that's planned to land in 3.4. One thing that we are going to do is the removal of reactivity transform. Right? So this was the experimental proposal that we've tried for a very long time, eventually decided to drop. And the removal of it is going to follow this deprecate, opt-in, and remove procedure. So it's been deprecated since the release of 3.3. So if you've been using it, you should have gotten a warning. And we've released a working version of it as a plugin in Vue macros. So if you want to keep using it, you could move to Vue macros today. And when we remove it in 3.4, you wouldn't experience any breakage. Or you can completely move away from it, obviously. So we're also shipping a lot of type improvements and fixes. We plan to stabilize the fine model in 3.4. And we also have an open project board with a lot of feature PRs that we're planning to merge soon. So 3.5 roadmap is a bit far out, but the focus of 3.5 will be on SSR-related improvements. Also, we'll address some of the outstanding custom elements issues. And we're thinking about stabilizing reactive props to structure, but because we feel it's going to be a bit rushed if we do it in 3.4, we want to give it a bit more time. So this is lined up for 3.5. We will probably open a discussion thread once we release 3.4 for this feature. So a lot of people are probably interested in Vapor Mode. So Vapor Mode is still in compiler R&D phase because of the energy that we spent on Rolldown and on the beat side. Vapor Mode is moving slower than expected, unfortunately. But we're re-kickstarting the process by adding, making Vapor Mode more of opening up the process to the team to make it a more collaborative process. So Kevin, core team member Kevin, is going to be leading the compiler work. Kevin has been doing a lot of very impressive work on the single file component compiler side. So he's going to be doing a lot of early development on the actual compiler for Vapor and polishing up the runtime. The ETA Vapor having something available for us to play around is pushed to Q1 or Q2 2024, but we do expect to have something that's minimally presentable in Q1. So stay tuned. Okay, so that's it for Vue Core. And now for Vite, Vite's growth is nothing but short of astonishing, in fact. So Vite has crossed 60,000 GitHub stars, and it's currently at around 7.9, almost 8 million weekly NPM downloads. And it's there's not showing any sign of slowing down in terms of growth. It has grown 4 times since over the past year, and we're seeing crazy adoption all across the ecosystem. So Storybook 7 now comes with first-class Vite support. Angular 16 now uses, actually Angular just released 17. I should have updated the slides. So Angular 17 now uses Vite as its dev server. Preact now uses Vite for the default tooling as well. Redwood 6, which is a React meta framework, has moved to Vite. Its version 6 is fully based on Vite, moved from Webpack. Bun, the new JavaScript runtime, supports Vite. So you can use Vite dev running on Bun. You can also use Vite dev with Deno. So in fact, because Vite has become so popular, all these different JavaScript runtimes have to prioritize Vite support as one of their major selling points. VitePress, a lot of you've probably noticed that the Vue documentation, the Vite documentation itself, and many other open source projects, including Rollup. So you've probably seen the familiar theme in a lot of places, and you notice that it's coming from VitePress, right? So VitePress is coming. So we've been stuck in 1.0 RC phase for quite a long time, but we are really, really close. There are maybe a few remaining issues that we need to tackle before we call it 1.0, but it's already pretty stable and extremely nice to use. And one of the bigger news lately is that Remix is now moving towards Vite. So it has recently released an unstable Vite plugin, and we believe it's going to move to Vite as the default build tool in the near future. So the Remix ecosystem is very excited to be using Vite because it's a big improvement from their previous setup. And Vite 5 is coming soon. We are currently in the final stages preparing for cutting the official release. The major things that comes in Vite 5 is Rollup 4. Rollup 4 is a new major version of Rollup that actually introduces a Rust-based parser. It's using SWC as to replace Acorn as its parser, and then getting the AST from the Rust side. So this improves Rollup's production build performance by a decent percentage. And we are also deprecating the CommonJS API of Vite itself. So this should be a relatively niche use case because when introducing this deprecation, we've already reached out to most of these downstream projects that's built on top of Vite to make sure that none of them are actually using the CommonJS API anymore. Most of these dependencies are now using the ESM API. And this is just part of the overall effort for Vite as this sort of newer build tool. We have the opportunity to help push the ecosystem towards a pure ESM world and get us out of this mixed CommonJS and ESM mess as soon as possible. We also have a better defined replacement handling. So previously, the global defined variable replacement in Vite is implemented a little bit differently between development and production. And the production build replacement strategy is also a bit of brute force because it's using regular expression replacements. So in this version, we're now using the ES build-based strategy to do the replacements, which should result in more solid and more efficient replacements overall. And then V5 is dropping support for for EOL Node.js versions, which means it no longer supports Node 16, 17, and 19. So the current LTS Node version, which is 18, is going to be the baseline supported version in Vite 5. So help us test it out. There are going to be extensive documentation on the potential migrations that need to be done. But overall, it should be pretty trivial for end users. For example, if you're using a framework like Nuxt, or you're using Vite mostly as a simple single-page application dev server, that really shouldn't be a lot of work involved. But still, if you want to get an early taste, please help us test and report early issues. But the release is pretty stable. We've tested with most downstream dependencies, and it should be coming very soon. Okay, so outside of Vite 5, obviously we just had VueConf last month in October, and we took some time to sit down and think about Vite's mission. And we believe that Vite has evolved from just a dev server to something that's much more significant in the JS ecosystem. We believe Vite is shaping up to be the shared foundation for higher level innovations in the web ecosystem. We're seeing so many different kind of frameworks built on top of Vite. They're all trying different interesting things, like quick exploring resumability, right? We're seeing Astro doing static, doing its own way of interpreting web performance, how you build websites. We're seeing traditional meta frameworks like Nuxt still shining really bright and offering extremely good DX. So there are different. So I think the biggest value of the web ecosystem is that it's big and diverse, and people want different ways of building things, and there are different use cases. So overall, we're seeing this interesting extreme diversity in terms of different solutions. We're seeing all these next-gen frameworks popping up, but we're also seeing this centralization around Vite as the shared common layer. So I think this is fascinating, and we believe this gives Vite a much bigger responsibility than it was originally intended to, and we need to kind of step up and live up to this expectation. So we summarized the Vite project philosophy in 5 points. The first is we want to keep Vite a lean and extensible core. We don't want Vite to try to mandate how you build applications. We will stop at the right layer of abstraction and allow innovations to happen on top of it. We want to push for the modern web. We want to leverage Vite's position to help us move towards a more standardized, less fragmented ecosystem. We want to take a pragmatic approach to performance, right? We will use what we think is the right tool at the right time for the right purpose, right? So that doesn't mean we will not make long-term bets. That also means we will use whatever is available in the short term to achieve the best DX in the short term. But that also means we will make certain investments for the long term to make sure we get the best possible DX in the long run, right? And then we want to support high-level frameworks. This is obvious in the sense that we already have all these frameworks built on top of Vite and want to continue serving them well. We want to make sure that these higher level frameworks don't need to waste their time reinventing the same wheels over and over again. And finally, we want to foster a collaborative ecosystem. And this is extremely important because we feel that the strength of both Vue and Vite is in their communities. We have this very grassroots, very collaborative vibe that's coming out of our projects and ecosystem. And I think this is probably the most important thing that we want to keep going. And that's what makes the Vite ecosystem extremely strong and welcoming and attracting more and more frameworks to move on top of it. So what's next for Vite, right? There are still problems we want to solve in Vite, and these are relatively hard problems, right? The production build is still slow. There's inconsistency between dev and prod environments. You know, when you have super large projects, there's still kind of slow network overhead of unbundled ESM during development. Sometimes there are confusing SSR external issues you might have run into. And we don't have enough control over the chunk splitting in production, and there's no first-party module federation support. These are hard problems to solve because they need to be solved at the bundler level. Currently, the way that Vite works is we still wrap two lower level bundlers, ESBuild and Rollup. ESBuild is used in development for the dependency pre-bundling, and Rollup is used for the production build. And two of these bundlers each have their strengths and weaknesses. ESBuild is fast, but it doesn't give you fine-grained control over build assets. The plugin API is not flexible enough. Rollup has extremely flexible plugin system. It has relatively mature support for application bundling, but it is slow, and its handling of mixed ESM and CJS module graphs is still something that can be improved. So these are two bundlers that each have their unique strengths, but they cannot be merged together into the same thing. When we have to use both for development and production, it also creates a certain level of inconsistency that we wish we could eliminate. This is why we are working on Rollup, which is going to be a Rust port of Rollup. So it's going to be a Rust-based bundler with a Rollup compatible API, but also the scope is going to be more like ESBuild because it's eventually going to include like JS, TS and JSX transforms and minification, all these features developed directly baked into it. So it will behave like Rollup, but work in terms of scope, it will be more like ESBuild. And our eventual goal is to be able to use Rollup as the foundation for Vite, so that we can perform the current tasks of ESBuild and Rollup with the same tool, so that we get better performance, better consistency overall. And you want to do it in a way that have minimal impact on the end users of Vite, right? So the current status of Rollup is in an early work in progress status. So the team that we assembled includes contributors with extensive experience working on ISPack, which is the Rust port of Webpack, some of you might have heard of. So we also have a collaboration with the ISPack team on shared tools and features. Both bundlers will be built on top of OXC, which is a Rust-based JavaScript parser toolchain. We also will be collaborating with Lucas, who is the current maintainer of Rollup, for Rollup behavior alignment. And the roadmap of Rollup will come in 4 stages. Stage 1 is going to be basic bundling, replacing ESBuild for dependency pre-bundling. And so the focus of this stage is going to be handling CommonJS and ESM in the same module graph. Stage 2 is going to be advanced bundling, essentially Rollup feature parity. We need to support Rollup plugins. We need to support tree shaking. We need to provide chunk splitting control for production for applications. In stage 3, we will provide built-in transforms, so you can transform TypeScript, JSX, minification, and syntax lowering, similar to how ESBuild supports all of these together in the same tool. And part of this work will happen in OXC, which is the language toolchain layer. But so some of this work can be done in parallel with stage 1 and stage 2. And finally, stage 4, we will introduce a Rust core in Vite and start leveraging Rollup as a dependency in Vite, as a Rust compile dependency in Vite. And we are going to Rustify some performance critical parts of Vite internals. For example, some of the Vite internal plugins for analyzing module graphs, for rewriting and generating the server-side rendering module graph. Some of this perf critical work can be also ported to Rust. Relatively well-defined and slow-moving parts. We want to be careful about this stage because we want to make sure that we maintain a good balance between the iteration speed, flexibility, and easiness for contributors to come in and contribute to the code base versus performance. So this is always going to be a tricky balance, and we want to be careful in evaluating what to Rustify and what not. But eventually, we want to also potentially provide a full bundle mode. That is to say, for smaller scale applications, maybe less than 200 modules, current unbundled ESM works extremely well. But when you have several thousand modules, you probably want to still do a full bundle up front, then serve the single bundle in the browser to avoid the network overhead, which is currently a major bottleneck for some users to use Vite. So, and that will be stage 4. That is a bit far out in the future, but that is the current plan. Roaddown will be open sourced likely before end of year. We are currently preparing all the logistics for opening up the project, with setting up, designing a logo, setting up the website, and writing contribution guides, making sure people can jump in and start contributing as soon as possible. And that will happen pretty soon. So please stay tuned. And that is all for the talk. Thank you very much. And hopefully we'll show more progress in the next coming next months. Thank you.
Oh my God, my mic is on.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that, Evan.
Did Evan just vanish?
Oh no, did we lose Evan?
What?
All right, here
Oh,
you
I'm
go.
still
There
here.
you are.
Back, Evan.
Okay.
Oh,
Awesome.
good to see you. First of all, Evan, good evening. Thank you for staying up tonight.
No.
All right, now, revelations. Do we do like a Q&A? Is that it?
Yeah, we actually have time for 2 questions from the audience, so feel free to raise your hand and we're going to go around with the mic.
I'll come because I have the mic in my hand. Do I see any questions?
Hi, Evan. I was just wondering, given that you have 2 major kind of things on the go here, both Vite and Vue, are you at all concerned about the demands on your time splitting between them and whether or not one of them may not get as much love as you would like?
That's a very legit concern. Yeah. And to be honest, that's going to be a big challenge for me. So this is something I kind of thought about, which is why I think if you look at the way that Vite has been moving, we started a Vite team very early on, and we've gotten Vite to a point where it can move along without me spending a ton of time triaging individual issues, solving every single problem. So I'm no longer the bottleneck on Vite development at the moment. If you look at the way that Vite has been moving, look at the contributor graph, the way people are handling the issues, pushing things forward. I think we've been very successful in setting up Vite as a team-driven project, and we're trying to do the same for Roaddown as well. So once we open source it, I'm involved in Roaddown more as kind of like a project, the manager, director kind of thing, where I'm trying to get the right people with the right skills to work on the right thing. So my role in Vite and Roaddown will be more along the lines of trying to putting the right people to work on this right thing together. Whereas on the Vue side, I'm still going to be more directly involved in the day-to-day technical issues and setting the roadmap, figuring out RFCs and implementing some of the features myself. But I'm also actively working to get the Vue side also moving towards a more team-driven structure. So we're currently working with Kevin, for example, Kevin Soda. They are actually working full-time on Vue now. So we are trying to set up a team structure that makes Vue development also less reliant on me as a single bottleneck to move more towards the way that Vite and Roaddown is working right now. So so overall, we are aware of this, and we're trying to figure out ways to make sure that my time is spent on the most, create the best return of investment for my time. That is what we're trying to do, yes.
Evan, thank you so much for for leading this community and for your many, many contributions. And there's so many here that benefit from it. We're just wondering, from a Vite perspective, is there anything coming down the road for better compatibility with micro front ends? And realistically, when might we see those types of improvements? Thanks.
Yeah, so module federation is in fact going to be one thing that we hope to tackle in Rowdown. So there has been community authored plugins that provides micro front end solutions through Vite, but we do have to hope to have first party module federation support, which we believe is going to be one of the more robust solutions for micro front ends. So this is also something we're collaborating with RSPack team on, because Zach Jackson, who's the author of Modern Federation, is now working at ByteDance and working on the web infra team with RSPack. So RSPack is going to get first-party Modern Federation support, and Vite is Rowdown is going to be collaborating with them to also get first-party support. In fact, we do hope to have cross-operation between, say, a Webpack, RSPack-based application and a Vite Rowdown-based application could actually talk to each other as micro front-end applications in the future. So this is definitely something on the roadmap. We don't have a concrete timeline on when we'll get to that point, because Rowdown is currently still trying to hit the first few milestones. But this is something we're keeping an eye on and having an active conversation with the stakeholders, especially the people working in this space. So so I just want to assure you that this is something we're eventually going to do, but we don't know exactly when yet.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that question. Okay, so I hate to ruin the party, Evan, but I have one more question, which makes it a third. If I'm not mistaken, Vue's turning 10 early next year, like in February.
Yes.
Any immediate thoughts on a decade?
Really haven't realized it's going this fast. In a way, I feel like 10 years in the JavaScript world, in the front end world, or overall in the tech scene, 10 years is a very long time, which makes Vue an old technology in a way. But I think it's cool because I think we've done a lot of things over the 10 years, and Vue is actually continued to evolve and for the better. So I'm actually still excited to be working on it, and I think we're gonna have something cool that's coming next year. So yeah, so I think despite being a 10-year-old technology, I think it's cool to still be relevant, and it's cool to still be able to find new ways to make it better.
Awesome. Well, you heard it here, folks. For Vue Toronto, Evan said 10 years, something special is happening.
Yeah.
Evan, thank you very much for your time today,
Okay.
or this evening.
Thank you, Evan.
Thank you. Hope everyone have a great conference.
Please give it up for Evan Yu.